So it is recording. And let us go to the slides. Okay, so this is discussed. The break is over. And holomorphicity, let's just recall. So holomorphic again, what was holomorphic? Holomorphic is differentiable throughout an open set. So we never say holomorphic at a point. We only say holomorphic on an open set, whereas differentiability was at a point. But differentiation, you know, right? Sum of differentiable functions is differentiable, product is differentiable. I think it's called Leibniz rule. Product is differentiable, quotient is differentiable. But of course, one has to say here that if it makes sense, quotient, when it makes sense, is differentiable. What is the meaning of making sense? Denominator should be non-vanishing. Only then you can take the quotient. If denominator takes 0, then of course you can't take the quotient. So whenever quotient makes, you know the quotient rule of differentiation. So all these things are true for differentiation. Therefore, all these things are true for holomorphic functions, obviously, right? Because holomorphic is nothing but differentiable throughout. So throughout you can apply these rules, and all these rules are true for holomorphic functions. And we can summarize this by saying H omega, which is holomorphic functions on omega, is a ring. Chirag and Aryaman also know what a ring is, no? Others certainly know.
Sir.
Yes, we know.
Basic algebra. So you also know what a ring is. So there is this operation of addition, there is the operation of multiplication, and all the nice properties with respect to these things. So you can add, you can take product. You cannot invert every element because some functions may vanish at some points. You can't invert every element, but it's a ring. One could ask the natural algebra question, which you can ask whenever you have a ring. It's natural to ask, is it an integral domain? What is the meaning of an integral domain? Can someone tell me?
If the
product of two elements is 0,
yeah,
then one of them is 0.
So so no zero devices, right? No zero devices. If product of two elements is 0, then one has to be 0. So you can ask this question: is it an integral domain? So you know rings which are integral domains, and you know rings which are not integral domains. So what can one say about this ring? See, in general, if you take functions, if you take a ring of functions satisfying some properties, chances are that it is not, right? Because what might happen is, if you can visualize, you can draw the graph in such a way that you know it is 0 somewhere and non-zero somewhere else. And the other function, if you take as non-zero where the original function was 0, and then you make it non-zero by going out of 0 somewhere else, the product is constant function 0, whereas these two functions are non-zero. So typically product of two functions 0, that does not mean one of them is 0. But here is an interesting thing. Maybe you have already seen this, right? The answer is yes, it is an integral domain. Have you seen this in 412?
Yes, we have seen this.
Yeah, so it is integral domain, and so it's a good ring. Is it a field? Of course, it's not a field because it's not invertible, right? For example, f of z equal to z. If you invert, it's 1 by z, but that doesn't make sense at 0. If you take any domain, you can construct a function which is not invertible, right? There is some point in your domain z0 in your region. It's a non-empty set. There's some z0, and of course 1 by z minus z0 doesn't make sense at that point. So it's not a field. Examples of holomorphic functions, of course, you know, I mean, the most basic examples are monomials z power n, whose derivative is nz n power n minus 1. And once monomials are there, and then of course polynomials are there, which are just finite sums of monomials. So polynomials are there. Then there is this most important function in complex analysis, exponential function, which is defined as this infinite series. And you all know that this converges absolutely for every z. All of you know all this root test and ratio test and such things, right? So you have various ways of checking absolute convergence. You know that the radius of convergence here is infinity. It converges absolutely for every z, and also it converges uniformly on every bounded subset of C. So if you don't recall some of these things, please do check before the next class. So it converges uniformly on every bounded subset, and because it converges uniformly on every bounded subset, it's a continuous function. And because of absolute convergence, you can do a formal check. Exponential of a times exponential of b is exponential of a plus b, and this formal check is a rigorous check because you can justify all your computations using absolute convergence. So this is one important property. It's a homomorphism from C to C star. Right? Exponential is never zero. This also you can easily check, and it's a homomorph. It converts addition to multiplication. It's a homomorphism from C to C star, and this checking is okay. And you can also check that its derivative is itself. These are some basic properties. There are some more properties we will see when the need arises. So its derivative is itself. Okay, so this is my last slide. We will stop maybe soon. A brief glimpse into the future. So let's just, just name some names so that we know what to expect at the right time. So many beautiful theorems we are going to see, and here are a few very famous theorems we will come across. One is called Cauchy's theorem, which you have already seen in 412, I guess. Basically, it says if you have a holomorphic function, then throughout a domain, then if you take a closed curve on that domain, on that its integral is 0. So we will see Cauchy's theorem. We will see what is called the global Cauchy's theorem, and there is a local Cauchy's theorem and a global Cauchy's theorem, and we will start there. I think that will be our starting point. So from next to next lecture onwards, we will start with Cauchy's theorem. Okay, then we will see what is called Runge's theorem, which I don't know whether you have heard this. You might have, or maybe you might not have. It's a beautiful theorem. I don't recall the exact rigorous statement right now. We will see when we reach there. But basically, the point is the following. Basically, roughly speaking, see, you would have seen that continuous functions on a closed interval can be approximated very nicely by polynomials, right? Stone-Weierstrass theorem or something like that. You could ask whether you can approximate nice functions by polynomials. So this is an important question. So you can ask whether holomorphic functions on a nice domain can it be approximated by polynomials, and the answer is no. And the most famous example is you can take 1 by z in a domain containing 0, right? Of course, I mean, it's not defined if a domain contains 0. So take in an annulus the function 1 by z. So it's well defined. It's holomorphic, analytic throughout the annulus. And then you can show that it cannot be approximated by uniformly. It cannot be approximated by polynomials just by integrating in a circle inside the annulus. So that contains 0. I mean, the 0 is inside, but so the circle, so you take a circle with center 0 inside that annulus. So it's well known that the integral of 1 by z, you can easily check, will be 2 pi I or something. And on the other hand, polynomials, when you integrate, it will be 0 because polynomials are holomorphic. By Cauchy's theorem, the integral will be 0. So if it's uniform convergence, you can change the limit and integral, you will get 2 pi I equal to 0. That's a contradiction. Contradiction to what? The assumption that maybe 1 by z can be uniformly approximated by polynomials. So analytic functions cannot be uniformly approximated by polynomials. So what is the next best thing? The next best thing than polynomials is rational functions. What is a rational function? It's of the form polynomial divided by polynomial. And that can be done. So I need to make some correct hypothesis, etc. And the rigorous statement of this, that holomorphic functions can be approximated by rational functions with some proper hypothesis thrown in, that is called Runge's theorem. Then there is a Weierstrass theorem, very beautiful theorem, which says that I can construct holomorphic functions as I like, meaning if you give me a set of points, I can construct holomorphic functions whose zeros, whose roots are precisely those points that you have given me. Of course, I need to throw in some hypothesis. For example, you know from your earlier complex analysis course that zeros of holomorphic functions should not have a limit point, right? You must have seen this. You cannot have a holomorphic function whose zeros, for example, are 1, 1 by 2, 1 by 3, 1 by n, etc. because that has a limit point 0. Zeros are isolated. This is one important theorem in complex analysis, first course, that zeros are isolated. So of course, if you give me any random set, I cannot construct a holomorphic function with precisely those zeros. That's not possible because zeros cannot have a limit point. But if you remove that condition, I mean, if you throw in that hypothesis that the given set does not have a limit point, then I actually can construct a holomorphic functions with precisely the set that you have given me as my zeros, as the zeros of my holomorphic function. This theorem is called Weierstrass theorem. We will see the rigorous statement. We will prove it. Beautiful theorem. And then there is what is called Mithag-Leffler theorem. Mithag-Leffler is one mathematician. No? Hyphen is part of the name. It's not Mithag and Leffler. Mithag-Leffler. So the theorem is about constructing, so Weierstrass theorem constructed holomorphic functions with some prescribed properties. Mithag-Leffler theorem, if I remember, is about constructing meromorphic functions with some prescription given. You can give, a prescribed set of poles, and at those poles, you can also prescribe what the principal part in the Laurent expansion should be. Don't worry if you're not following my whatever I am saying. I'm just verbally saying certain things, just giving some glimpse. If you don't follow, it's perfectly okay because we are going to come to it in the slides properly, rigorously later, much later actually. This will take some time to develop. So Mithag-Leffler theorem basically is about constructing meromorphic functions with prescribed properties, with prescribed set of poles and with prescribed set of principal parts of those poles. So this we will do later. Then there is this famous theorem called Riemann mapping theorem, which says that it characterizes simply connected domains in a holomorphic way. So it basically says that if you take a simply connected domain in C, simply connected domain in C, then it can be mapped to the open unit disk. It can be mapped to the open unit disk in a very nice way. And what is very nice here? Biholomorphic. Biholomorphic meaning your map is holomorphic. The map is 1, 1 and on 2. Therefore, the map is invertible. And the inverse is also holomorphic. Holomorphic, bijective. Therefore, there is an inverse. Inverse is also holomorphic. So, biholomorphic. This you can do for any simply connected domain with one exception, which is the whole complex plane. The whole complex plane cannot be mapped biholomorphically to the open unit disk. In fact, you can prove that. You know the proof already from 412. Can someone quickly tell me why the whole complex plane cannot be biholomorphically mapped to the open unit disk?
Functions cannot, holomorphic functions, if it is bounded, then it must be constant.
Very good, Lewis theorem. So therefore that is ruled out, and that is the only exception, that is Riemann mapping theorem. So it's a very beautiful theorem. Except the whole complex plane, any other simply connected domain if you take, we will construct meaning we will show the existence of a biholomorphic mapping. We will not construct in the sense, I will not say take this function, but we will say such a function exists, which is biholomorphic and mapping to the open unit disk. One of my favorite results from this course. We will do that. And then there is this Picard's theorem, the little Picard theorem you might have seen. Maybe you haven't seen a proof. In fact, you would not have seen a proof. We will prove that. Little Picard theorem is a vast generalization of Liouville's theorem. So Liouville's theorem says that an entire function, entire meaning holomorphic throughout C, defined throughout C and holomorphic throughout C. Liouville says that it cannot be bounded. And Picard says that it's much, much more than that. Not just that it cannot be bounded, it cannot miss too many points. The range has to be the whole of C. Well, not quite. You can miss 1 point as an exponential of Z. It misses 0. So you can miss 1 point, but not more. So if you have an entire function that misses 2 points, then it has to be the constant function, nothing else. That's a little Picard theorem. Then there is a big Picard theorem, which is a statement, very similar statement in terms of essential singularity. We will see the correct statement when time comes. Yeah, so we will try to prove both these theorems. In fact, yeah, let's see when the time comes. We will see. So time permits a few words about some of these theorems. I think I have already mentioned something or the other about these theorems. Not quite precise, not completely correct maybe, but again I was recalling just from memory. It's okay. The rigorous correct statements will come on the slides at the right time. Note that the field of meromorphic functions is the quotient field of the ring of holomorphic functions, right? Whenever you have an integral domain, a natural question to ask is what is its quotient field? What is the notion of quotient field? For example, the basic example is you have the ring of integers. It is an integral domain, and its quotient field is the field of rational numbers, right? So what is Q to Z is what is called the quotient field, and ring of holomorphic functions is an integral domain, basically because of the identity theorem. It cannot have limit points, and that is enough to prove this. Because zeros are isolated, you can show that it's an integral domain. Therefore, the natural question is what is its quotient field? And it's a corollary to the Weierstrass theorem, this one. Weierstrass theorem that I mentioned, that the quotient field is actually the field of meromorphic functions. What is meromorphic? The only singularities are poles, right? All singularities are all isolated, and not just it's isolated, these are poles. It could be a simple pole, it could be a pole of some finite order. It is a field of meromorphic functions. So these are beautiful statements where some algebraic terminology can be used to express results in complex analysis in a very beautiful fashion. We will see some more such algebra results using complex analysis. Okay, so I think this is my last slide, and it's also time. So we will stop here. Let me go to, yeah, so unless you have some questions, I think we can stop here. Anyway, maybe I will stop recording, and if you have something, you can ask me. Yeah, so